Hi, I'm Geoff from Cyberis with my colleague Gemma. We're here to talk to you today about a vulnerability that we discovered in Gandi that allowed us to transfer control of Nominet domains into an AWS Route 53 account.
Domains are controlled by ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Each top-level domain has a registry which is run by an organization. It might be a profit-making organization, it might be a non-profit organization. But as an example, VeriSign is the registry in charge of .com domains. Nominet is the registry in charge of .uk domains. The registry is responsible for keeping the master database of all the domains registered in each top-level domain. It generates the zone file for the TLD, which computers use to route traffic to systems that are hosted inside each TLD. Under the registries, you have various registrars, and registrars are companies that are in charge of registering domains and updating the registry on behalf of domain owners. You might have resellers in the mix as well. So resellers don't have a direct contractual relationship with the registry, but they do resell domains to people on behalf of the registrars. So there's a complex hierarchical picture there. There's lots of complicated contractual relationships between various parties. There's complex integrations between different registries, resellers, registrars, which makes the domain name infrastructure function as we all need it to. Now, domains don't always stay with the same owner, and they don't always stay hosted with the same registrar. Over time, there needs to be a process to transfer domains from one owner to another or from the control of one registrar to another. Geoff, how does this generally work?
Okay, so the domain owner who wants to transfer the domain would normally disable the whois privacy settings so that the new registrar can verify the ownership of the domain that is to be transferred. Some top-level domains have mechanisms in place which a domain owner can use to prevent transfers from happening. So the owner needs to disable any transfer lock protections on the domain that is to be transferred. The owner then needs to obtain a transfer authorisation code, and this step depends on the registry that the domain belongs to. It might also be referred to as a transfer code, an auth code or authorization code, or an EPP, depending on the top-level domain and the registry rules that apply. So in this instance, for Nominet-controlled domains such as .uk and .co.uk domains, the owner who wants to transfer a domain to a new registrar needs to set a value called an IPS tag. This tag, an IPS tag, stands for Internet Provider Security, and it acts as a label identifying the domain registrars. So when a domain is to be moved from one registrar to another, the domain owner needs to update the IPS tag of the domain to reflect the tag of the intended new registrar. The new owner then requests a domain transfer from their new registrar. The existing domain owner should then receive an email to the existing administrative address on file for the domain, which acts as for authorization for the domain to be transferred. If the existing owner approves the transfer request that should be received in an email, then the transfer should proceed as intended.
The relationship between AWS and Gandi is effectively a reseller type arrangement. AWS is not itself an ICANN accredited registrar, but it has partnerships with various accredited registrars to provide domain name registration services for Route 53. Gandi is one of those, and it provides that service for Route 53 for Nominet-controlled domains. The transfer process for a Nominet domain into Route 53 management is as you would expect. If you own the domain and you want to transfer control into Route 53, you need to set the IPS tag value to match the new registrar, which in this case would be Gandi, because they're providing that service to Route 53. You then request transfer from your Route 53 account and theoretically authorize the transfer before it completes.
What we found here, though, with Gandi and AWS is that for Nominet top-level domains, essentially the transfer didn't go through the authorization stage. So the Nominet domains could be transferred into the control of Route 53 without the domain owner granting permission. How it should work is that the new owner or controller should disable the whois privacy, set the IPS tag to Gandi, and request a transfer. The existing owner should receive an email asking them to authorize the transfer, and only if the existing owner approves the transfer should it occur. What we found was that if the Nominet domain being transferred was already at Gandi as a registrar, that authorization step wasn't required. So When a Route 53 user requested that these domains be transferred into the Route 53 account, there was no authorization check, and so you would be able to take control of any Nominet domain registered with Gandi, and effectively it could be stolen by an arbitrary Route 53 user. Setting the IPS tag to Gandi wasn't required by the domain owner because in this instance, in this finding, the domain is already configured with an IPS tag of Gandi. So this only affected Nominet domains hosted at that particular registrar. Disabling whois privacy also wasn't required for this attack to work. The actual ownership information for a domain is held in a database by Nominet, and whilst this vulnerability allowed control of the domain to be moved into a Route 53 account, it didn't update the ownership information for the domain in those Nominet databases. Once somebody has taken control of a domain, though, they are likely to be able to satisfy the checks in place that would allow those ownership details to be updated. So once you have the hijacked domain inside your Route 53 account, you effectively have full control over the DNS for the whole domain, and you can decide where email and web traffic goes, as well as a whole host of other things as well. So you could transfer the domain to a different registrar completely from the Route 53 account if you wanted to. Now, there are some mechanisms for people to get help if the domains have been hijacked. For example, people can report instances when a transfer doesn't go to plan, and emergency recovery procedures do exist. But of course, if you transfer a domain across multiple registrars, it can become, or it's likely to become, increasingly difficult to regain control.
The impact of having control of your domain taken away like this is obviously really serious. So an attacker can direct customers away from your website, intercept emails destined for you or your business, and even masquerade as your business in public.
Yes, that's right. We identified this on the 12th of February, and we disclosed it to AWS on the same day because of the severity of this issue. AWS responded quickly and raised a critical security incident and contacted Gandi immediately. Within a few hours, transfer had actually been paused whilst Gandi investigated the issue alongside Amazon. The root cause was identified on the 15th of February, and a permanent fix was in place and tested by the 16th of February when transfers were finally re-enabled. So a very, very swift response indeed from all involved.
And Gandi have told us that they don't believe anybody was actually impacted by this vulnerability whilst it was present.
That's correct. So they've said that no customers have been affected. There are indeed procedures to report events like unauthorized transfers to AWS and to Gandi, and there were no reports of this particular vulnerability or weakness being exploited to that extent. Of course, it may have been possible to transfer domains that perhaps weren't in active use or weren't closely monitored, but Gandi have told us that their investigation showed that this had not been the case. What I found particularly interesting about this weakness that we identified, though, was it was a very simple business logic flaw that wasn't picked up through the security testing that AWS and Gandi both go through. It only affected certain top-level domains. In this example, in this weakness, Nominet domains, but the fact that it had gone unnoticed for a significant period of time and there had been no known reports was very interesting to me.
Yeah, we know that companies like AWS and Gandi go through fairly stringent security testing on a regular basis, particularly around their integrations.
Yes, as a penetration tester, this particular weakness for me highlights the fact that you can make no assumptions when you're testing the business logic of an application or a solution. Sometimes a very basic step, in this case, the assumption that a transfer needs authorization needs to be checked when you're doing technical assurance testing. You need to verify that these parts of the business logic have been implemented correctly. In other words, step through the entire journey for all of the different top-level domains in this case.
There's a lesson here about checking your security assumptions and making sure you understand what assumptions you have made so that when you come to technical assurance testing, you're making sure that everything you have assumed to be true is true and everything you assume to be false is false. I guess if you haven't enumerated those assumptions, it's very difficult to make sure you get the coverage you need when it comes to security testing. If
you're interested in learning more about this vulnerability, the timelines and what AWS and Gandi did to remediate the issue, you can read more about it on our blog. Thank you very much for watching.